So today I want to make a video about this stat, I guess, that just came out, and it was a survey that showed that, two things that are pretty scary. The first one being 70% of millennials are likely to vote socialist, and another 36%, which is up, I believe, 8% since the last time they did it, which I don't know exactly what year that was, but I know it was 28%, and it is now 36% support communism. And like I've said before, a lot of society, if you look back and study history, a lot of it is learning the same lesson over and over again. And this is something that we're doing, in Canada currently. It's probably going to happen in the States. It's happening in a lot of Europe. And like I said, it's learning the same lesson over and over again. And what is that lesson? Well, in a nutshell, that communism, socialism doesn't work. It's very appealing to a lot of people. I understand the appeal. The problem is that all you have to do is look back at the history of it. Like, anyone who supports this kind of stuff, you can tell beyond a shadow of a doubt that they have not studied history and they don't understand history whatsoever. Even recent history. This isn't. We don't have to go back 1,000, 2,000 years to learn to recognize this kind of stuff. All you got to do is recognize the Soviet Union, China, um, even Venezuela, the number, Cambodia. The numbers go on and on, or the amount of places go on and on and on. And how many times do we have to learn, or to learn this lesson that communism, socialism doesn't work? And every example they point to is easily debunked. I don't know, whatever word you want to call it. The main argument is the Scandinavian countries, but that's easily debunked. And then if you look at someone from Sweden or Finland or whatever, in the States, they do better. They do better if they're in the States. In other words, their standard of living is higher if they live in the States, which completely debunks the idea that socialism is what caused it. It's more or less a high IQ population. And the other thing they don't tell you is that although those countries are socialist, they do have a much higher tax burden on the lower end of the spectrum. When people think of socialism, or not communism, but socialism, they think of it as that the rich basically completely funds their lifestyle and that the poor pay like no taxes. And at least from what I've heard and what I've looked into, the poor actually do pay a pretty good amount of taxes in the Scandinavian countries. It's not quite as big as a gap as what people would have you think. And the other point being is that to I don't know what's the best way of putting this. 36% of people basically are so selfish in their way of thinking, and they're trying to get their political agenda rammed through, is that and that they're willing to step over 100 million bodies. And it's very crazy. And if you're someone who's more, extremely nationalistic, let's say a white nationalist, the left will point out that you're willing to look over what, 5, 6 million, maybe 10 million. I don't know exactly how many people the Nazis killed, for your political beliefs, but they completely ignore the fact that communism killed more than 10 times the amount of people as fascism, as the far right ideologies did. And that's another point in and of itself, that fascism and Nazism is, well, mainly the Nazis under Hitler weren't actually far right. They did have a lot of far left policies as well, but that's another video in and of itself. But the main point being here is that, like I've talked about in a lot of other videos, is that we're going to have to keep learning the same lesson over and over again. And like I say, the solution to this kind of stuff in a nutshell, I don't think it's going to happen, but it would be to create areas where we're not having left-wing policies. We can still have elections, but we're not having left-wing policies. No socialism, no welfare state, no carbon tax. Maybe you have a flat tax or a much more evenly spread out tax. Um, and like I say, with Alberta and or Saskatchewan leaving, we would implement policies to where, no, we're not having that kind of stuff. You'd write it right into the Constitution to where it can't happen. And you would have like a Second Amendment kind of thing, that if someone like that did try to implement that kind of stuff, you could not have it happen. And You could have other areas, namely Eastern Canada, that, hey, if you guys want to go the other way, you want to have no capitalism, you want to have tax the rich like 80, 90% marginal tax rates, go ahead. We'll see which one's better. That's something I can't stand about these people nowadays, is that they're afraid to put their name out there, or put their, you know, stick their neck out there. In that, if you're so confident in your political ideology, well, you should support a system like this. Let Alberta, let Saskatchewan leave, and anyone else that wants to join. We'll have a free market, right wing, you know, country, I guess, if you want to call it that. It probably would be considered a country, or I don't know what you'd call it, a republic or a territory. I don't know what they would call it officially, but I assume it'd be a country. And then Eastern Canada, you guys want to have your far left policies, and we'll see which one's better. And I mean, I'm sure that states under Trump at least would be much more willing to work with Alberta, Saskatchewan than Justin Trudeau, especially when they're that much more to the left if Alberta and Saskatchewan leave. And that's kind of the way things are going to be. But basically, take home point being here is that given support for socialism and communism is growing, my guess is that we're going to have to learn a hard lesson again, that nothing is for free. There's no free lunch. Society is going to be in for, I mean, Canada is going to have a recession pretty soon, and I think it's going to hit us pretty hard. I mean, it's probably going to happen in the States too, but I think it's going to hit Canada quite a bit harder, and we're going to have to learn some pretty hard lessons. And that's kind of the way things are going to be. So I'll leave the video there. If you liked it, make sure to hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.